get together to learn and strengthen ourselves, and the three special mitzvahs connected with women, Kashrus, Shabbos, and Taras Mishpacha, as well as other halachos that are pertinent to women. And our goal is to prepare ourselves and our homes to welcome Mashiach. Tonight's class is dedicated in honor of Shtar Nesara Bas Devaira on the occasion of her birthday, that she may be gebenched with the year of bracha and atzlacha, with good health, arichos yamim mishanim taibas, ad chaim nitzchiyim, much yiddish chassidus anachas from all of her children and grandchildren, parnasa bar chava, and only revealed good in all aspects. And of course, the main bracha, the geula hamitas v'ashlema, may it be immediately now. If you would like to dedicate a class in honor of someone or in zchus of someone, please reach out to us via our email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com, and please join us afterwards for tzedakah, tehillim, and a Mashiach thought. So let's get right into it. For our first class in Kashrus, we will be continuing on the topic of Kashrus of foods in and from Eretz Yisroel. We are grateful to have with us Rabbi Zibell. Rabbi Zibell is the Kashrus administrator at the RCF, the Rabbinate of Central Florida, and he delivers classes to the general public on various Kashrus topics. He's also highly active and answering consumers' Kashrus questions on a daily basis. Rabbi Zibell is known for his practical grasp and application of Kashrus knowledge, as well as his clear way of explaining halachic matters. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and a good evening. We're going to be continuing foods in and from Eretz Yisrael. This is going to be part 3, class 3. The last 2 classes, we discussed foods that are found, you could be finding wherever you are, if it's in the U.S. or anywhere else, that came from Eretz Yisrael, what to look out for, what are possible things that one should be careful with. And now we're going to be discussing 2 more aspects regarding that, and then we're going to be discussing food within Eretz Yisrael. If a person finds themselves within Eretz Yisrael, how are things over there? What you want to be looking after when it comes to Kashrus. So 2 more points regarding foods that are found around the world that were produced in Eretz Yisrael is we have to be extra familiar with the logos as well, how they look, besides for knowing. People always say, yeah, I know Badatz Yerushalayim is good. But in truth, there are a few Badatz, there are a few Hashgachos which are going to call themselves Badatz Yerushalayim. Now, the one that everyone usually is referring to when they mean Badatz Yerushalayim, they mean Badatz Yerushalayim Ha'eda Cheredis. But there is another Hashgacha in Yerushalayim, the Rabbanut Yerushalayim Hadrin, which calls themselves as well Badatz Yerushalayim. If someone is just going by the name, and is not being particular that the logo also matches, they can end up with the wrong hashgacha. Or there's even another Badatz Yerushalayim calls themselves Badatz Yerushalayim Eida Cheredis, but it's the Eida Cheredis for Svardim, which is a different hashgacha, different level, nothing to do with the famous Badatz Yerushalayim Eida Cheredis. So just knowing the name and being familiar with hashgacha is not enough. You also want to be familiar with the logo to make sure that this is the actual one that's representing the Kashrus organization that you want to be consuming. And one more thing is, many times when foods come from Eretz Yisrael, they are more prone for infestation, meaning like in flours or in pastas or in couscous and these things, due to climate and due to other things which the way they are processed in Eretz Yisrael, they are more prone to that. So therefore, it's something which someone needs to look out for more than things that are produced locally in America and the like. Fine, we'll move on now to within Eretz Yisrael, whether someone's visiting or someone lives there, or someone has just moved there. Within Eretz Yisrael, what guidance and what we look out for to make sure to have the most kosher experience. And in truth, we're told by the Rebbe that when one visits Eretz Yisrael, a person should only grow in their kedusha and grow in their observance and their hidurim, as they are in a place which is a holier place, and therefore they need to grow their standard as well. So when going to Eretz Yisrael for a visit, or even someone moving there, they only want to be growing and keeping a higher standard of kashrus, a higher level of kashrus than you were outside. And chas v'shalom, not the opposite, going down. Unfortunately, many times people go to Eretz Yisrael and just assume and think that everything over there is fine, or they'll go in many tourist areas and there'll be many from people eating and just assume if so many from people are eating in these places, everything must be fine. But many people, unfortunately, are not familiar and are tourists and don't know better. And we can't just eat somewhere or go somewhere based on what we see others doing. But we need to be educated ourselves and know what is the right thing to do, which hashgachas we should be eating from, and so on and so forth. Fine. So for basics, something which sometimes people get confused, and we already mentioned this, but we're going to mention it again. You're going to Eretz Yisrael, you're going to be shopping whatever you're buying, even if it's a simple cucumber, a tomato, in any grocery store. That grocery store's fruit and vegetable section needs to have a reliable hashgacha that certifies that these fruits don't have any problem of arla, that these fruits and vegetable have truma and mais those separate from it, and if it's Shemitah year, that these fruits and vegetables are coming from an area that there's no Shemitah, so either outside of Eretz Yisrael, which was be called Yevul Chutz La'aretz, I grew outside of Israel, or non-Jewish produce that actually belongs to a non-Jew all the time, which would be called Yevul Nochri, which is a non-Jewish produce, and not selling you something from the base relying on Heter Mechira, which is a problematic sale of the land that we discussed briefly last week. So that would be an additional thing to look out for Shemitah time. So one needs to be extra careful that even buying a simple fruit and vegetable in a grocery store, that place has a reliable hashgacha, and you have to see a certificate. It's not enough to ask a worker, oh, is this under a good hashgacha? What hashgacha? Because they'll always just answer you what you want to hear. They'll answer you badat this, but whenever they think a fruit person wants to hear, they'll sell it to them. But you actually have to see an actual certificate for that location and do it. Now, at times, it may be hard. Some areas don't have fruits and vegetable stores with reliable hashgacha. So in such a case, you will have to do something called, it's called Iber Meiser. Iber Meiser means to take Meiser again, to be safe, but without a bracha this time because it's out of doubt. So we're talking about produce which has hashgacha, but not as strong as hashgacha, so you're in doubt whether Meiser and Trum was properly separated. So you'll have to do the process again of Iber Meiser, which is the whole thing for itself, but you can obviously be in touch with the Rav on how to go about. A bracha wouldn't be mentioned, as we just said. And this would only help for fruits and vegetables that have no possibility of arla. There's no doubt of arla, that the fruit grew within the first 3 years. If there's even a doubt whether the fruit could have grown during the first 3 years of its life, then it should be not altogether, because nothing will help. You may separate from today to tomorrow. It's not going to permit that fruit. That only applies to fruits. It only applies to fruits that can grow within the first 3 years. And this was again discussed in detail in the class at kashrusbeintheknow.com when we discussed arla, and you can have a list over there of all fruits which could possibly grow within the first 3 years. However, all other fruits that don't grow during the first 3 years, or all vegetables, it does not apply, and one would be able to do Iber Meiser, separate Meiser out of doubt, in such a case if they can't access a store which has a good hashgacha. The next is, sometimes people say, how about milchigs? Milchigs, maybe one could be more lenient for milchigs, and there are many times, I hear all the time people say, yeah, when it comes to milchigs, we'll go out to many places, pizza or whatever, because it's only milchigs. And as we discussed at length in eating out of doubt, how many pitfalls there can be with milchigs, and we discussed very briefly in last class one aspect of it, just the camera aspect, that sometimes halachos could be done through camera, and that can itself be problematic, but that's just at the tip of the iceberg. There's many more core issues that can be with milchig, especially when it comes to cheeses and milk that was done outside of Eretz Yisrael, which is common, beginning with not having proper supervision at the milking, the mashgichim not even showing up or not even knowing what to do when they come there, not checking the cows for illnesses, which according to halacha would make the cows treif, those illnesses, if they're terminal illnesses, and would actually make the milk coming from the cow's treif. And then from that, if it's cheese production, all the complexities of koshering cheese production machinery, which is very complex, and unless you have very properly trained mashgichim, can be big issues. The cheese can be actually treif. And besides that, very commonly there's very certain specific enzymes that need to be used to make specific cheeses, and they're not always available in a high standard of Chal Yisrael. And hashgachas rely on various leniencies to dilute it and to make cheeses from there, and there could be many issues as well from that. So milchigs, just off the bat, could have many problems, and therefore even milchigs needs a very good, reliable hashgacha, telling you that backing the product, and not any hashgacha works. In addition, if someone just says, I'm just going out for a slice of pizza, what could be wrong with a slice of pizza? We just mentioned 4 things that could be wrong with the cheese. Besides for that, the sauce, if the sauce doesn't have a good hashgacha, sauce is very kosher. Tomato sauce is very kosher sensitive. Tomato sauce can be made on equipment which is mamish treif. If it wasn't kosher properly, you have right there now a sauce which is probably not kosher. And then on top of that, in Eretz Yisroel, flour has to be yashan. Who's tracking that, making sure the flour is yashan? On top of that, in Eretz Yisroel, the flour has to be sifted for bugs. It's very common for flour to be sifted. Who made sure that happened? Obviously, challah needs to be separated. Who makes sure challah was separated? And then arla, the spices used, it could be spices from Eretz Yisroel, arla and meiser and truma and shmita issues with anything added as toppings as well. And all that without a proper hashgacha on top of it, all these things could be fall between the cracks. And with a simple slice of pizza, you could end up with 9, 10, or 10 different serious issues. And even if it's calling itself Badat and Mahadrin and it has a very fancy logo, all that could still all fall between the cracks without proper enforcement, without proper mashgichim doing their job, and with owners which sometimes may not be the most trustworthy. All that is common enough that it should be avoided. Even for something simple like pizza, you want to have a strong, reliable hashgacha. So that's regarding milchigs. In addition, when it comes to bug checking in Eretz Yisrael, many times people don't realize it has a hashgacha, but if you read the fine print under the hashgacha, it says in Hebrew, this needs to be washed and soaked in soapy water and agitated, and only after rinsing it off, eat leaf by leaf, is it acceptable to eat. So we may be at times used to produce in America, which is already washed and checked and ready to eat. And in Eretz Yisrael, you may see a bag that has hashgacha. You have to read the fine print because many, many times it's actually just saying that you need yourself to wash it and do a basic checking or to wash it very thoroughly before eating it, even if it was grown in greenhouses and all that, because there's still always the possibility of bugs. So you always have to look out for that fine print, even if you see hashgachas on the bag. On top of that, things to look out for as well. You may go into some places, whether it's a small grocery store or a gas station, or this is more common by duty free in the airport. Some places do not sell their chametz, and for a good month or more after Pesach, it could be totally forbidden to buy things from there. At times, people don't realize they're leaving Eretz Yisrael after Pesach, or they're coming to visit for Lag Ba'omer, they're going whatever it is, and they're in the time frame that could still be an issue. And you have to look out every place which sold their chametz gets a certificate from the Rav that sold it, and you want to look out for that certificate. It's a certificate of selling chametz before buying something in a place that could have been possibly not sold over Pesach. Now, people say, how about parv? Parv as well, like we mentioned, tomato sauce is parv, could be very problematic. And vegetables are parv, it could be problematic. Just because something's parv doesn't mean you could have a more of a lower hashgacha. You would still need something with a strong, reliable hashgacha. Now, to reiterate, many times you will be told all our products in the store are the top 2 hashgachas, Rabbi Landau and the Badat Yerushalayim Eida Charidis. And that you'll be told by the workers, or if you call them mashgiach, they'll tell you that over the phone. If there isn't a strong system to enforce that, how often is the mashgiach coming in to check that this is actually happening? Is there a frum person on site at all times that's checking that out? What system is there in place? So just because they're saying that they're keeping to a high standard, if the hashgacha doesn't have the manpower or the enforcement, that may not be actually happening. So that may not be enough to rely on, unless you're 100% sure. In addition, sometimes places will actually be misleading. They'll put a picture of a big logo of Rabbi Landau's Hashgacha or Badat Yerushalayim Eida Charidis, and you'll see that on the wall. You'll think it means something, but it actually means nothing. And Obviously, if they get caught, they'll take it down. But until then, they might as well. They feel like the consumers will feel comfortable seeing that. But you want to see a proper, legitimate certificate, and it's a legitimate certificate. It's not just going to be a big picture of a logo. It's going to have a wording, and it's usually going to have a signature, even a hologram, which is a little shiny sticker, and it's going to look proper. And you want it to be to that address, and all that needs to be double and triple checked to make sure. And like you mentioned again, not to confuse, there are names that are similar. If someone just told me they were in Yerushalayim, I said, where'd you eat? They said, oh, wherever I went, it was Badat Yerushalayim, because these days, the Rabbanut Yerushalayim Mahadran, they on their certificate, they just write in very big, Badat Yerushalayim. Someone who doesn't know, again, to look out, like we mentioned right in the beginning of the class, to look out and realize that just because it says Badat Yerushalayim, that doesn't mean it's the famous Badat Yerushalayim. You have to see their logo, and you have to see Badat Yerushalayim Ha'ed Charedis. So being educated could prevent you from making such mistakes. Now, when someone's eating out in Eretz Yisrael, and they may be a bit different in America in one aspect, then Eretz Yisrael is very common, even for a very reliable hashgacha, to rely on a non-frum person to be present in the store. They will have a strong system of mashgichim coming and what they let in and how they're checking, and it's a strong system to oversee, but at the same time, they will have practically many times, most of the day or a big part of the day, someone who's not from, they're Jewish, but not officially or not outright from, they may not seem from in any way, no yamka, no tzitzis, or, but they are maybe on a certain level, basic from, and that will be many times even by very reliable hashgachas, so that shouldn't scare somebody unless there's something more of a red flag than just that. But if there's a strong hashgacha in place, usually they will have a strong system to enforce it, and that should be a concern, because then that's something that's the way it is in Eretz. In America, it's not as common, and we don't usually do act like that or practice that, but it's something that's acceptable still in Eretz Yisrael. However, obviously, if there isn't a strong hashgacha, then there's nothing to discuss. That could be a very big concern. Now, many times people ask, we'll mention specifically hashgacha. Not trying to say anything bad about hashgacha. Just mentioning straight, open facts that anybody could know themselves. Very common hashgacha, which many people discuss, is the Rabbanut Yerushalayim Mahadran, which today they call themselves Badat Yerushalayim Mahadran, Badat Yerushalayim, and people say, yeah, they're fine, they're on a good level, and in truth, since they are a Rabbanut Hashgacha, they have all the downsides of a Rabbanut Hashgacha, which we mentioned in the first classes about the Rabbanut, which you could check out in class number 1 about that. In addition, they accept from all Badatim. So sometimes I'll see a seminary will put out a list, and they write that Badat Yerushalayim Mahadran is fine to eat at, and then under that they have 4 Badatim which they say is not acceptable. But in the meantime, this Badat Rabbanut Yerushalayim is accepting all those 3 or 4 that they say is not good. So it's just from a lack of knowing what happens. The Rabbanut Yerushalayim Hadran, which now calls itself Badat Yerushalayim, will accept from almost all the Badatim, even those that usually wouldn't feel comfortable. So that's one thing to be aware of, and besides for the government aspect. And on top of that, because there's also less enforcement due to less funds and also less manpower, they're relying a lot more on the owners, and the owners many times could be totally not firm at all. So that's something to be aware of as well. So it's not so simple, and the one should avoid such places due to the setup of the way it is. Now, in addition, there's a very common thing. There's 2 or 3 or 4 hotels that many frum people go to. Very, very, even very big programs, famous programs, go and use these hotels. And in truth, these hotels don't. Some of them don't even have a Mahadran Hashgacha. They have the most basic Rabbanut Hashgacha. So how do they sell themselves to the frum people? How do frum people think they're finding? What they do is they find one frum Mashgiach, which looks and talks, and knows a bit of Kashrus, and he becomes like the hotel's puppet, and he speaks to the frum people and tells them what they want to hear. And at times, he may be doing a decent job, but at the end of the day, since he's only being backed by the hotel. He doesn't have hashgacha. He's literally hired by the hotel to represent the facts to the frum people. He has very little power really to be enforcing what he would want to enforce, and he has no hashgacha backing him. And the most he could ever enforce is what the hotel committed to. And the hotel, most of these hotels committed even to just a basic rabbanut. So the most he could ever put his foot down and have someone come in and help him step in would get the basic rabbanut involved. But in the meantime, he's telling consumers that they're on the highest possible level, and there could be a lot of problems with that. And we won't get into the difference between one hotel and the other, but some hotels may be a little better than others. But all of them, the big famous ones that are used by many people, are actually more on the problematic side, and will need to be looked into. One more quick thing: at times the Lubavitcher Rav and the Chashuv Rav, which may have a good reputation, since he's on the Rabbanut, the local Rabbanut, will have to give hashgacha on basic things. So you'll see the name of a Chashuv Rav, which actually is maybe experienced with Kashrus on basic items, which those items may not even be Chalav Yisrael, may have contained within it milk powder, which is not Chalav Yisrael, because this Rav is involved in Rabbanut, and therefore he has to give for the basic level and Mahadran, and he may even have a higher level for the Lubavitch crowd to only stick to that. But one needs to be aware, just because you see the name of a Rav, and maybe a Chashuv Rav and a Rav that knows Kashrus, doesn't mean that it will be automatically at an acceptable level, because it may just be the basic Rabbanut, and that's what he's representing. We'll stop here for this week.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Zibell. Wow, this is very, very eye-opening. Okay, so for our next class in Hilchos Shabbos, we are excited to continue our series on Amir al-Achri, part 11, where we will continue to discuss non-Jewish help on Shabbos with Rabbi Braun. Rabbi Braun is the Marza Asra of Crown Heights, and we are very grateful to have him on our program tonight. Thank you so much for making the time to be here.
And as I always respond, my absolute pleasure. I want to touch on a topic which might be a bit of a sensitive topic, but it's part of Torah. As the Gemara says, Torah hi v'limud ani tzarech. Torah, we need to learn the Torah, and even if it's a bit sensitive and might upset some people's equilibrium, but we have to say things the way they're al pi Torah. So last week we spoke about one of the exceptions, one of the exemptions where it's okay to have a goy do malacha for you on Shabbos is if you're asking a goy to do something which is only asur midrabanan. And since you're asking a goy to do it, so that's a double drabanan in halachic terminology, shvus to shvus, and that can be permitted in certain cases. And one of the cases we mentioned, if it's a tzorech gadol, if there's a great need, an extreme great need, and we mentioned at length that you can't just determine on your own what's considered a great need. You have to ask a shaylas chacham, you have to ask a rav. But that was what we mentioned last week. So the question came up, and it's a question that needs to be addressed, even though it's, like I said, some people might not like the answer. A woman did not put on makeup before Shabbos. And we'll talk about what the possibility is why she didn't put on makeup. Now she wants to get a guy to go put on makeup on her on Shabbos. Now that's a tzorech gadol. Obviously, for a woman to go around without makeup is pretty embarrassing. So it's both an issue of kavod habriyos. Kavod habriyos is a very important thing in halacha. And women being dressed properly and appropriately in a dignified way is all something extremely important in halacha. Ezra Sefer made a rule that people should be selling perfume, going from town to town. Peddlers should be selling perfume because it's important. A woman should look beautiful. Halacha recognizes, the primary beauty is for the husband, but still this is an important thing. Shalit is gana al baila. Her husband shouldn't look not nice in the eyes of her husband. So, but either way, whether we appreciate kavod habriyos or not, but it's a tzorech gadol for her. This is very important. So, can we just have a goy just put on makeup? So, one possibility is where she just didn't put on makeup before Shabbos. It was a crazy Erev Shabbos. If you note the connection between crazy and Erev Shabbos, a lot of homes see similarity between those two terms, crazy and Erev Shabbos. Not that it has to be that way, but sometimes it just happens like that. That's one possibility. And if there was no chance to put on the makeup, there was cholent and fish and flesh that had to be prepared, and there was a few crises with the toddlers and who knows what, and the makeup went out of the way. But not on Shabbos. Mela not to wear makeup during the week. On Shabbos not to wear makeup. But it could be another issue where a woman is going to the mikvah on a Friday night. Now, the Eibishter has a sense of humor, and he deliberately planned her mikvah to be on Friday night, and a woman, when she goes to the mikvah, is supposed to be without makeup. And now there's a double problem. Problem number one, she's going to be sitting without makeup, so everybody's going to know she went to the mikvah that night. because she usually, although it doesn't necessarily mean she went to the mikveh, she could have had that crazy Erev Shabbos. But for whatever reason, the minute that's the concern, you start thinking that's what everybody's thinking, even though nobody's even thinking about that. But that's just the nature of the beast. That's how people are. So that's busha number one. And the busha number two is the lack. So there's two embarrassments. Embarrassment that people think I went to the mikveh, and embarrassment of sitting without makeup. Both are an issue. So let's take that apart. And I have to say, before I gave this shir, I spoke to quite a few Rabbanim about this, and I wanted to find out, is there really such a thing? Is there a Rav out there that will say, sure, no problem, make up Shabbos? No. So the consensus was, no, that's not acceptable. That's not called a Tzorah Gadol. But let's understand why. And the reason I mention this example, A, because it's a woman's shir, and B, because this could give us some insight into what's considered a Tzorah Gadol. So if the woman didn't put on makeup before Shabbos, not because the Torah told her not to put on makeup, because she's never get around to it, so that will be much harder to permit her to put on makeup. I'm talking about through a guy again, obviously. But what about if it's because of mikvah? So she had no choice in the matter. She's supposed to remove her makeup before mikvah. That's what the halacha is. So shouldn't we allow, because of covered abrius, because she's embarrassed that everybody knows she went to the mikvah? So let's talk about that for a moment. The fact that people find out you went to the mikveh is not supposed to be an embarrassment. Halacha does say that a woman should hide the fact that she's going to the mikveh. There's a mitzvah haster tefillah, so to hide the mikveh. That doesn't mean, by the way, no one's allowed to know that you went to the mikveh. You might call up the Rav and ask a shayla about your mikveh. You might have to inform somebody for technical reasons. You might have to inform them. Certainly the mikveh lady knows that you went to the mikveh. The halach is about sheilelech b'mhuma, not to make noise about it, not to publicize it. So, if the fact that somebody finds out in a roundabout way because they're looking at your face and they're deducing our whole pilpul, normally she wears makeup. Now it looks like she's not wearing makeup. That's not part of that mitzvah of the haster tefillah of hiding the mikvah. But the reality is that women are embarrassed. Whether that's what it says in the Shulchan Aruch he's supposed to be doing, the Shulchan Aruch was not told me he's supposed to find a roundabout way to cover up the fact he went to the mikvah. That's not addressed in Shulchan Aruch. But as Rabbanim from the old generation used to say, what does it mean that she's supposed to hide a mikveh? She shouldn't be walking with a towel down the street. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that she has to do every single shtick. But for some reason that became a sensitive topic, and a lot of women are very embarrassed about the fact that they went to the mikveh, which is great. It comes from a place of tznius. It comes from a good place. So that's a positive thing. But that's not called embarrassment. Everybody goes to the mikveh. It's a normal thing. The only question is when you went to the mikveh. So you went tonight, that's not something that halacha would recognize as a covered habrius. But what about the fact that she's not wearing makeup? That's embarrassing on its own. And for some people, it's more embarrassing than others. Some people just don't go anywhere without makeup. There's no such thing. And for some people, it depends. It's a chasna, it's a bar mitzvah, it's a bris. I'm going around the corner, I'm just going to the bus to take my kid to the school bus in the morning. Everybody has their limit. What's considered embarrassing? So again, if it's on a Friday night, it's not supposed to be embarrassing. Okay, because it could have been because of mikveh reasons. So again, that's not embarrassing, the fact that she went to the mikveh. But besides for that, the definition of covered abrius is something which is embarrassing for people at large. If a certain person has an embarrassment because for them this is very important, that's not called covered abrius. Generally speaking, again, there are exceptions to every one of these rules. That's in general terms. What about the principle of tzorah gadol, that something which is a great need, even if it's not an issue of kavod habrius, embarrassment, something which is extremely important for someone? So we have a halacha, and we touched on it last week. Sometimes we tell you, well, you should really calm down. You really don't really need this. We spoke last week about, not that you don't really need it, but you don't really have to be stressed out because of it. And there's ways to deal with stress, and Torah tells you some stresses are legitimate stresses, and some stresses are not legitimate stresses. Last week we spoke about informing parents that their child has just given birth. Having to go and make that phone call. Because the parents are still on shpilkus, because they want to find out, was their baby? They want to find out if it was a boy or a girl. This is extremely important. So we spoke last week, there's a concept of person has to learn how to calm down. You don't have to know. If you want to know, nothing's going to happen. Right? There's that concept. So, and the definition of when you need to tell a person, a woman who's giving birth, halacha is, you're allowed to have a guy light a candle for her, even if she's blind. Because she's more calm when she knows there's a candle in the room and people can see. In the old days, it was a candle. Today it would be a light. She's more at ease. Even if she can't see anything because of that candle, We want her, because if a woman during labor, we want her to be in a calm state. And that's where the whole idea of doulas come in. And the question is whether doulas are allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, but that's not the subject of this year, so I don't want to go into that. But there is a limit. A woman could say when she's giving birth, she needs her husband to come with her, she needs her mother to come with her, she needs her shriger not to come with her, and the doula. So what's the limit? How many people could come? Everybody could go into the car on Shabbos because she needs it. It's because what if each one of those people cost $1,000? Would she also say she needs that? So that's where the word need is a very subjective word, and we need to understand what the word need is. So back to the tzorech gadol of the makeup, the definition of tzorech gadol is tzorech gomer she'i efshali is belade. It's an absolute need which is impossible to be without it. Let me give you an example just to illustrate. 2 weeks ago, we spoke about that in a case where there's a great loss of money, you're allowed to ask a guy to do it the Rabbanan. But if there's a loss of profit, that's not called hefsed merubah. You're allowed to ask a guy to do it the Rabbanan on Shabbos because your whole freezer is going to go off and all the meat is going to go off. And you're asking not only to do it the Rabbanan, and it's a lot of money involved. But if a person has a profit they could have made and they're losing out their profit, that's not called a hefsed merubah. Now let's understand this for a moment. The person could have made a nice profit, and they don't make it. Isn't that for a person a tzorech gadol? It's a great need to make this profit. I need to make. I was so set that I'm going to make this money. No, but it's a profit. It's not. You're not losing something you already own. So therefore, calm down, take it easy. You don't need it. So although a person might personally feel that they need makeup, and it's okay for them to feel that way, but to go and because of that allow a guy to put on makeup, that's where the red line. Now, sometimes, by the way, it could involve a deraisa too, especially if it involves lipstick, but that's another whole discussion. Therefore, there might be us anyhow. And it is a challenge for a lot of women to do on a Friday night. It is indeed a serious challenge. And therefore, some people have come out with the most extreme heterim, which are problematic according to halacha, whether it's about going to mikvah on Friday afternoon, which is problematic, whether putting on Shabbos makeup, which is also problematic. In fact, out of all the solutions, going to the mikvah with makeup might be the most muhudr solution, rather than having a guy put on makeup and you after mikvah. Because if it's a makeup that doesn't come off when you go into the mikvah, it's not going to partially come off, then it's not the end of the world for a woman to go like that. Of course, the ideal thing would be to go without makeup at all and do like they did 15 years ago. Because up to about 10, 15 years ago, that was the say that people just went without makeup. That was it. But today, people became much more self-conscious, and that's part of how the generation is. But so at least this solution, however, of having a guy do it is not acceptable. Let's move on to the next thing. I don't want to talk too much about makeup and mikveh. That's a bit off topic, but it was somehow related to Amid al-Nachri. I want to talk about the Isser Hana'ah. We mentioned right in the beginning when we started Amid al-Nachri that Chazal took this Isser of Amid al-Nachri in a very serious way. Hifligu Chachamim is the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe. I guess the way to translate would be the Chazal went very extreme. They went very extreme when it came to Amid al-Nachri, and they made so many decrees to prevent people from Amid al-Nachri. Not only they told you not to tell a guy to do a malacha, but if you did, or if a guy did it on his own, they put a bunch of rules. You have to protest. You can't have benefit. You can't have benefit if a guy did a malacha for a yid. So, a guy does a malacha on Shabbos for a yid. On Shabbos, you can't have benefit. And after Shabbos, there's a rule you have to wait, b'chdei sheyasa. Or b'chdei sheyasu. B'chdei sheyasa means you have to wait the amount of time that it takes for the guy to do the work after Shabbos. Chazal were worried that people might end up telling guy to do things on Shabbos. It's an easy way out. This Shabbos we're restricted. There's 39 things we can't do. Simple solution, ask a guy. I know we're not allowed to, but it's hard, so you ask a guy. When you find out that if you're going to ask the guy, you're not going to gain anything, because you'll be forbidden to benefit from it. And not only you won't be able to benefit it, you won't be able to have it after Shabbos for the amount of time that it takes, so you haven't accomplished anything. You didn't even gain extra time right after Shabbos. So let me explain this a bit better. The halacha is that if a person cooks on Shabbos, chas v'sholom, person does any other malacha on Shabbos. On Matzah Shabbos, after this happened, right away after Shabbos, other people are allowed to benefit from it. And there's no halal. And if chas v'sholom, someone cooks for someone else. So even if you cook specifically for a certain person, that person is allowed to go after Shabbos, not on Shabbos, immediately after Shabbos, allowed to benefit from it. And you don't even have to wait the amount of time that it took to cook. It takes an hour to put up for the challah to cook. After Shabbos, I can have the chalent right away. You don't have to wait that extra hour after Shabbos. That's when they do a real malacha. But when they go and tell a guy, or a guy does it on his own for a Yid, that's more serious, and we don't let him even have it right away on Matzah Shabbos. Why? Because some people might make the cheshbon, okay, it's worth telling a guy to do a malacha, at least I'll have it right after Shabbos. I'll save time. So, because people take the Isser HaMil Nachri very lightly, the Lashon Alter Rebbe is, the Lashon Volder Poskim, Isser HaMil Nachri Kal Be'ena Abrius. People treat it very lightly. For those that came to the Shir, maybe we know a bit what Amil Nachri is, but before we came to the Shir, what do you mean? Just tell a guy. You just tell a guy, yeah, it's a roundabout way. You say, now we know all those tricks. But and when we start talking to people, but everybody does it. Well, actually, it says in Shulchan Aruch that everybody does it. It says this is one of the examples that Shulchan Aruch recognizes the weaknesses of people, and for some reason, Torah is eternal, and it's still a weakness. Shulchan Aruch says Kal Be'ener Brius. People treat this issur very lightly, and therefore people might violate this issur only with the intention of having it on Matzah Shabbos, because they want to eat the chalent right away on Matzah Shabbos. I don't know who eats chalent on Matzah Shabbos, so maybe that was a bad example. But sushi, something else. But now you're not going to gain anything by telling them on Shabbos. You're not going to want to do an Isser for nothing. You're not going to gain anything, because even after Shabbos, you'll have to wait the amount of time to call B'chdei Sheyasa. This Isser, as we spoke in previous classes, right in the beginning, I think we spoke about this, it applies on Yom Tov too. And Yom Tov also, if you ask a guy to do malacha for you, you can't benefit. An example brought in halacha, I know that's not so practical in 21st century, in 2025, but I'll just mention an example so you get an idea. A guy brings a present to a Yid on Yom Tov, and he brings him fruit. And this is the kind of fruit that's available in the farm. It's now available connected, mechubel karka. It's possible that this guy went and actually took it off a tree on Yom Tov. Could be in the beginning of Yom Tov was still mechubel karka, connected to the ground. Or a guy brought you animals, pets, whatever it is, which is a type of animal that's mechusar say that needs to be hunted. So it could be before Yom Tov it wasn't yet hunted, which is an isser to do. You can't eat or move. It's when it comes to food you can't eat it. When it comes to muktzah you can't move it until Yom Tov in the evening, until Matzah Yom Tov, and even then you have to wait B'chdei Sheyasa, the amount of time that it takes to go to the farm and take it off the tree or go and hunt this pet. So you shouldn't gain that time. After the amount of time B'chdei Sheyasa, then you'll not have benefit, even if you actually deliberately told the guy to do malacha. So let me talk about a case in point, a practical example. The guy brought you something on Shabbos because he in Shulchan Aruch says because he was riding on a horse. Today's age he went in a car, and therefore it took him much quicker to go bring this item on Shabbos. It took him 3 hours. If you would go by foot, it would take 10 hours. So when you have to wait B'chdei Sheyasa, do you have to wait 10 hours? Or the fact that the guy took a horse or drove by car gives me, so after Shabbos you only have to wait the amount of time that it took the guy. You only have to wait the amount of time that it took the guy. So you don't have to make the amount of time that it would have taken had he gone by foot. No. Whatever amount of time it takes for him to do this on Shabbos, that's the amount of time you have to wait. If a guy does an Issur D'Oraisa for a Yid, then other people also can benefit. If he does an Issur D'Rabbanan, then the halacha is other people could benefit. The Yid himself can have benefit, but other people could if the guy did Issur D'Rabbanan. He did it for one particular Yid, other Yid could have benefit. Tchum Shabbos, even in the case where Tchum Shabbos is clearly Minat Torah, is treated in this context like Issur D'Rabbanan. So let me give an example. A guy lit a candle. Shulchan Aruch says a guy lit a candle. Today's an age, go turn on the lights. Turn on the lights the same as turning on a candle. So it's Issur D'Oraisa, and if a guy turned on the light for a Yid, you can have benefit from the light, and other people also can't have benefit. However, that doesn't mean I have to walk out of my house. Imagine it's dark, and you have a maid that works in the house, and it's pretty obvious when it's dark, you're supposed to turn on the light. So they turn on the light, and they turn around for the Yid that is sitting there. You're not mechuy. If you ask the guy, you have to walk out of your house also. That's how serious it is. But if you didn't ask the guy did it on his own, even though normally you're not going to have benefit, so the halacha is, don't have benefit from the light, but you don't have to walk out. You are enjoying the very fact that there's light there, but don't go and read something and have actual physical direct benefit from the light. The guy lit a flame, a heater. In the days of Shulchan Aruch, it was a medura, a bonfire. On Shabbos, you don't have to walk out of the house. So you could go and stay in the room, even though you will have that, and the room is warmer, but don't go directly warm yourself up by the fire. That you can't do. So Chazal didn't force you to go out of your house. That's a nice thing on their part. And the same thing applies if you're staying in a guy's house, you're in a hotel, and the guy did something, but that becomes your house. So even though it's not really your house, since you're staying there for Shabbos, that's a tircha for you to go out. Hoyske mention, however, that if you want to do a midas chasidus, a pious thing, that even though you're not going out of your house, but don't face the candle. Turn away, face the other way, show that you don't want that candle on Shabbos. But if it's not in your house, and the guy turn on the light, walk out. You can't have any benefit, you're benefiting. If you ask the guy, even in your own house, you have to walk out of the room, because you can't have benefit. LED candles are considered, according to most poskim, LED candles are not considered a deraisa, they're considered a derabanan. Most, according to many poskim, the electricity itself is not a deraisa. And if a guy lit an LED light, I said LED candle, sorry, LED light, then you can have, it's a guy doing a derabana for you, so you can have benefit, but others could have benefit. There is another whole topic over here, which I don't know if we'll have time to get into this. It's already, is it 9:10? It is 9:10, but we're going to touch this next week, the big Amazon topic. You have deliveries coming to you on Shabbos, a guy is doing malacha for you, whether he's doing carrying in the Rosh Hashanah, whether it's coming from a Carmelist, whether it's coming out of the Tchum. The guy did it because you asked him to bring in a Shabbos. The guy did it on his own and it just arrived on Shabbos. All of that will be addressed next week, but it's all related to what we just spoke. I'll go to Nacht.
Thank you so much. That was very fascinating, very clear. Okay, so for our next class, we are excited to begin a new topic that we all encounter many times a day, and we can definitely use some clarity on. We are very grateful to have with us Rabbi Bell back again, teaching a new series on Birchas Hanehenin, the Birchas before and after eating foods. Rabbi Bell is the Rav of Congregation Lubavitch in Montreal and the Dayan of based in Montreal. Thank you so much for making time to be here tonight.
Okay, thank you for having me. You're able to hear? Okay, fine. So since it's the beginning of a new series, so I wanted to share something, and I was also asked to put in a little bit of the hashkafa end of things in each class. I mentioned in one of the previous classes that the last Maimer Adato that the Rebbe said was in Tafshin Nun Aleph. The Rebbe said didn't say any Maimorim at all in Tafshin Nun or Nun Beis. When Tafshin Nun Aleph there were two Maimorim. There was one Chayesora, and the Maimer Chayesora, the Rebbe spoke at length about the inyan of Birchas, of Brachas in general, and Birchas Hanehenin in particular. So I just wanted to maybe take a few pieces from this, and today we'll just talk about this area over here, so how it relates to Chayesara. You can look yourself in the Maimer, but the main part over here, he said the inyan of Brachas is Klaus Aveda. That the idea of making brachas represents the general idea of Avedas Hashem, because bracha himaloshan hamshacha. Bracha means to draw something down. But pirush the barach ata havaya. When you make a bracha, you say barach ata havaya. So the bracha is hamshacha. What are you bringing down? Is you bringing down shem havaya. Lahamshich shem havaya. See footnote 21 on the bottom. Seirim is there lahamshich pinas ata shalamayla mishem havaya. You're bringing down ata, which is so high, it's higher than the whole concept of a name, that it should be Hashem, as you're speaking directly to Him, the essence of Hashem, to be revealed in the name of Aya, that should come down further to Shem Elokim. In any case, that Hashem's presence should be revealed down here. It says later in the Maimer that the idea you're making a brach on the food, so it's penetrating down the lowest levels of Gashmias. So before you bring the godliness down into the food, you bring the godliness down into your soul. And that's why you say, Baruch atah Hashem, and then Havaya Elokeinu. It's Elokeinu, Lias Gili, Orein Sof, Benefesh Kol Yisroel. That you bring down this Gili Elokus in your own soul, Shetischazik Amunas Hashem Belibam Begilui. That your faith in Hashem in a revealed way, that becomes our energy, our power, and the lacher shenimshach v'nisgal b'Yisroel. So once it became Elokeinu, sorry, something wrong over here. I'm not sure exactly what. Yeah, Shalachar shenimshach v'niskal b'Yisrael after Elokeinu nimshach al yodam magil v'gam lamatal liyas melech ha'elam. That then makes Hashem the king of the universe. So we have the different orders over here. The first you have Baruch Atah Hashem, Baruch Atah Avaya, that you bring down the presence of Atah, the Shem Avaya, and the further it comes into our souls Elokeinu, and after that melech ha'elam comes down into the world. So we see that the inyan of brachas is close. Inyan of Vedas is bringing down godliness down into the world. Okay. Fine. So
Rabbi Bell, sorry, we're not seeing you. Okay, now we're seeing you.
Okay, fine. But you thought you saw the mimer. It's better to see the mimer. Yeah. Okay. So now just there are many dinim of brachas. And I think the way I'll begin going through just some common cases of knowing what bracha to say on what food. So the most common case that people encounter is, or one of the common questions that people ask is that of a meitzi and a mezainus. Because when you look in Shulchan Aruch and the Alter Rebbe Siddur, which, by the way, one of the things that the Alter Rebbe made a summary of and especially since there's a number of dinim that are very complex and need to be constantly reviewed, so he put in the Siddur, actually, the Birchas Hanehenin, that people should be able to review these dinim. And he points out over there that Mina Teira, that we have from the 613 mitzvahs, the mitzvah Birchas Hamazon, to bench after eating bread, that's really the only one of these Birchas Hanehenin that's a bracha min haTeira. That's a requirement midiraisa. And even then, as we'll discuss later on, that's only when a person fills up. Yachalta v'savata v'erachtos Hashem alakacha. So if you ate v'savata and you filled up, then you have the mitzvah min haTeira v'erachtos avaya alakacha. What's the chiyuv of women in this? So we'll discuss all that we'll talk about bracha achreina. Right now we're talking first about bracha rishena, about the bracha before eating. So all of these brachas are mitzvahs min derabbanan, and as it explains when he plays Chassidus, then brachas to draw down a light that's higher than in midiraisa and Neshamas Yisroel, mitzvahs derabbanan can draw down even a higher light. The din is that before you make a bracha on the food, that it's kosher shamayim, it's considered to be in Hashem's possession, and the only way we have permission to get benefit from it is by making the bracha. We'll see in the Maimer that Rebbe says that doesn't mean that it goes out of being kosher shamayim. It's still kosher shamayim. It's still a sanctified object because it belongs to Hashem. But nevertheless, once you make the bracha, it gives you the opportunity and the ability to take these holy, to transform the food into holy objects. It's an amazing thing. It says in Tanya that all the Gashmius Eilam Hazeh is the Klippus Nega, but through making a bracha on the food and then using the energy from that l'shem shamayim, so that enables it to go to a level of kedusha, and it takes it out of its worldly limitations, so to speak, to bring in the realm of holiness. Okay, so what makes something a meitzi and what makes something mezainus? So you have a concept of mezainus bread. So it's bread, but it's mezainus bread. What makes it mezainus? This bagel is mezainus or is it a meitzi? Is the pizza a meitzi or a mezainus? So many people are confused by this subject, and for good reason. But when you have the overall picture, it's much easier to organize. I had this chus many years ago when the Lubavitcher Women's Cookbook came out. So Rabbi Marlo Olav Shalom was in charge of all the halachic segments, many halachas in there, and he had two younger light helping him to prepare things and going over things, and I was one of the two. And we split up the work. So one of my jobs was going through the recipes. There's straight halachic sections, and then in the recipes, so I had to go through all the bread recipes to make sure they're all a meitzi, and all of the cake and cookie recipes, the desserts, to make sure that they were mazenas. And I actually found one bread that was a mazenas, and I found something which was in the mazenas section that was really a meitzi. It was interesting. The description of the bread said that it's so rich, it tastes like cake. I said, well, the reason it tastes like cake is because it is cake, halachically speaking. So what makes something bread? What makes something cake? Or what makes it a mazenas? So I'll just give, there are many details, but let me just give the global picture in the average case. Okay. In order to be mazenas or a meitzi, it has to come from the 5 grains. I'm not talking now if there's a mixture. So you have different sorts of breads. Today you have gluten-free bread. Gluten-free bread, if it doesn't have oats in it, there are gluten-free oats, and there are all different sorts of permutations of different types of flours that are being made today. So even if it tastes like bread, if it does not have one of the 5 grains, it is most certainly not a meitzi and not a mazenas. We're only talking about from the 5 grains. In general, if it'll have gluten-free oats, for example, so if it's possible to make bread just out of that, so then it would nevertheless be a meitzi or a mazenas, depending on what it is you did with it. But it has to be from the 5 grains. So we look at the flour content, and we also look at the liquid content. So in general, bread is made with flour and water. Once you use a liquid other than water, so then the Rambam holds that that's called pasaba bekisnin. That's a special category of bread that one makes a mazenas on it unless you make your whole meal out of it. And that's why what they call mazenas bread or mazenas bagels, mazenas pizza, whatever it happens to be, what they're doing is using another liquid instead of water. So either they're using apple juice, or they're using milk, or they're using something else for the liquid content, and that, according to the Rambam, is a mazenas. And Alter Rebbe's passions in the Siddur that although a Bal Nefesh wouldn't make a mazenas on it, he would eat it only in the middle of the meal. Nevertheless, halachically speaking, you're allowed to make a mazenas on it, and that's what you have. Many baked goods that are in this category. One of the things that people get confused by, and rightfully so, is they say, well, there's really no such thing as mazenas bread, because that's only a mazenas if you don't make a meal out of it, and people are making a meal out of it. So that's a separate question. Okay, and we'll talk about that not today, but it's something which is a significant issue, and that's why most pizza shops and the restaurants have some sort of letter from the Rabbanim, which I don't know how many people read them or take them seriously, but that is the issue. There are some hashkachas that won't give hashkacha at all on this type of bread. I hear in Williamsburg it's very difficult to find bread with that's a meitzi during the week, because everybody's eating the mazenas bread. Whatever the case is, one of the way the Rambam speaks, he calls it pas nilusha b'cholov, that you made the dough with milk. And he lists other liquids there as well, if it's eggs. So that's why egg matzah, for example, is a mazenas, because it's made only with eggs. What happens if it's a mixture of in halachic terms, it's called mei peires, which literally is fruit liquid. But eggs would be considered in that category, and milk is not coming from fruits, but it's halachically in that category of mei peires. What happens if you mix milk together with, water together with one of these other liquids? Then we go after the majority. So one would have to, if one has a cookie recipe, for example, something of the sort, or one wants to make some sort of mazenas bread or something like this. So you would have to take all of the liquid contents of the eggs and whatever juice you're putting it in, and measure that, compare it with the water. If it's more than 50% water, then it's a meitzi, even if you eat a very small amount of it. And if it's less than 50% water and the liquid content is more than 50%, which is sometimes difficult to calculate. You have large eggs and medium eggs, and how do you measure exactly the volume? In any case, if it's less than 50% water, then it would be a mezanis, unless you make a meal out of it. And again, I'm not discussing now what is the halachic definition. Now, the Rebbe has a very specific definition of what constitutes a meal in this context. It has to do both with the amount that you eat and whether you filled up or not. But that's a subject for itself. Right now, I'm speaking about only a small amount. So I'll mention a very practical manifestation of this. Sometimes people ask, what's the bracha on dessert? If cake is served for dessert, do you make a bracha or do you not make a bracha? Okay, so in order to answer that question, I have to add one permutation of this liquid mixture. Now, the Rebbe says that there's a difference. If you have majority of a non-water liquid over the water, then it's a disagreement. There are other opinions that say you should make a meitzi on that, but you're allowed to be lenient and rely on the Rambam and make a mezanis on it. If, however, the liquid is so abundant that there's more liquid than there is flour, and the example the Alter Rebbe gives is lekach, that the honey cake that the Alter Rebbe was speaking about, at least, had more honey than it did, not just more honey than water, it had more honey than flour. So in such a case, the Alter Rebbe says everybody holds it to mezanis. Not only the Rambam, everybody holds it to mezanis. So you might be wondering, and rightfully so, why should I be worried whether everybody holds that it's a mezanis or only the Rambam holds it as a mezanis? If the Alter Rebbe says we can do like the Rambam, make a mezanis on it, so why should I be interested in this? So the answer is you have to know that in order to answer the question, do you make a bracha on this dessert or not? Because we're lenient, like the Rambam, to make a mezanis on it, but the other opinion says it's a meitzi. So if you're having it for dessert at the end of a meal and you already made a meitzi, so now the Rambam says you have to make a bracha, but the other opinion says it's already covered by the meitzi. So now you have a question of a safek bracha, and the general principle is when you have a doubt about making a blessing or not, you don't make the blessing. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says that if it had so much of the liquid, like the case of the lekach, that it was more liquid content than flour, and again, when I say liquid, I mean non-water. You had more non-water liquids, and the example given was that of honey. Then you did flour, then it was such a rich mezanis, so then you would make a mezanis even on dessert. Everybody holds that's a mezanis. But if it didn't have so much, even though if you would be eating it not in the middle of the meal, you would make a mezanis on it, relying on the Rambam. Nevertheless, if it's the end of the meal for dessert, then one would not make a bracha on it. So it's a very common question people ask, and unfortunately, I can't give us really a straight answer because people ask, should I make bracha on cake? I said, I don't know. What's the recipe? They look at you for like, you have to know the recipe in order to know whether you make a bracha on it or not. Well, the answer is you have to know the liquid content compared to flour content. Now, if you have a batter, the truth is that today's lekach, I doubt there's more honey than there is flour. What they're making in the bakeries, not necessarily is there that much honey in it in comparison to the ways it was in the days of the Alter Rebbe, or at least the lekach the Alter Rebbe was speaking about. But others,
We don't see or hear you, Rabbi Bell. We see you, but we don't hear you.
Rabbi Bell, we don't hear you.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know what to say over. So if you have a batter, which is a loose batter, and you're pouring it, so then if you have more liquid content, non-water liquid content than flour, you'd have a sponge cake or one of these the loose batters. So if there's less flour than there is the other liquids, that's like the Alter Rebbe's leka. Such a mezanis you would make a mezanis on at the end of the meal, and that, according to all opinions, is a mezanis. Still, if somebody made a whole meal out of it, they would still have the same issue of as we mentioned before, as it is with mezanis bread if you make a meal out of it. But that's a very practical application of having to know whether it's mezanos to begin with, and if it is, what category is it? And those are the general two categories that we are dealing with. Now, there is another category which also can occur, and that's the halachic phrase is pasaba bekisnin. So the Gemara has this phrase, but doesn't define what it is, and that's why we have different opinions in the Rishonim. But kisnin, so according to those that the opinion we just said, it comes from the word kesasin, which means to munch, to snack on. People don't usually make an entire meal out of such bread, which is why it doesn't have the bracha meitzi. Another explanation says it comes from the word kis, which means a pocket. So that is speaking about a dough. If you could imagine a turnover, and perhaps even a pie, where you would have the crust, even if it was just flour and water, but you didn't bake it yet, and you filled it up with something sweet, you're making a cherry pie, and you're baking the cherry pie at the same time as you're baking the dough part of it. So then, since the filling is sweet and it's not made as a meal, it's made for l'tainuk because of its taste. So then that was also mezanos under all conditions, and then you would make a mezanos even on dessert if it was of that nature. Now, if it was filled with something else, let's say you have a knish, so you have a potato knish, something of that sort. So what's the bracha on a potato knish? So the potato knish does not fit in this category because the potato knish is being eaten to fill up as part of the meal. It's not being eaten for the tainug. You don't give a potato knish for dessert. The reason that's normally a mezanos is that the dough is not made with flour. It's made with shortening or something else. So that oil and shortening are all going to qualify as the Rambam's type of mezanos, that since it's not liquid, that it's also a mezanos. I went over my time, but one very important point I need to add over here, that Rabbi Zalman Shimon of Dworkin paskin that if you use juice that is reconstituted, it was made from concentrate, then let's say juice made from concentrate, they take the water out, then they put the water back. So it's like 25% juice and 75% water. You have to count it as 75% water. So then if you're using juice, you have to make sure that it's not from concentrate. It has to be pure juice. It cannot be mixed with water. But we'll continue on the subject as Hashem next week.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bell. That was very helpful. Okay, before we conclude with Tehillim and Mashiach thought, we'd like to turn to you, all of our listeners. If you enjoyed these important and practical weekly classes, please consider partnering with us to keep them going. We do rely on and appreciate all contributions, any amount. So please do log on to mikvah.org/donate and select Project Chana Power Hour in order for the funds to go to this program. Thank you so much. And we will proceed along here with some tzedakah. Go ahead and join me in giving some tzedakah. And then we will continue on with saying the Rebbe's kapitel, followed by kapitel Chaf. All right. And Chaf Gimel. Asher hamales elacha nasasi es enai hayeshvi b'shamayim hine che'eni avadam al yad adonaihem ke'eni shivcha al yad kvirta kein inenu el Adonai Elohenu ad sheyachanenu chanenu Adonai chanenu kirav savanu vos rabas sabala nafshenu halag hashananam haboz lege'ei yainim. And we'll continue on with Kapitel Chaf, keeping in mind our family, our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Lamnatzeach Mizmer David Yancha Danei B'Yam Tzari Sagav Chashem Elehayaka Bishal Chazrichan Kaidash Mitzian Isadak Yizkar Kamen Chaysecha Ba'Ilas Chaydash Misela. Yitzin Chachal Babacha B'Chalatzascha Yimali Nirana Nabi Shuasecha B'Shem Elohinu Nidgal Yimali Atana Kol Mishal Isacha Ati Yadaiti Ki Hashia Adina Mashiach Yanehu Mishmekachet B'Gvurais Yesha Yeminai. Ela Baracha ve'ela Bastusim Va'anachnu B'Shem Adonai Elohinu Nasker Himakar V'Nefalu V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Nis Aidad Adonai Hashia HaMelech Yaninu V'Yam Karin. All right, moving along to the next part, and this comes from a Sikha the Rabbi said in the Sichas Chelik Gimel, page 297, and that is that in the desert, in the Midbar, right before Bnei Yisrael entered the land of Eretz Yisrael, they were commanded to be very careful with the Kashrus of their vessels and with the purity and the sanctity of their families, of their family life. And in our days now, as we are now on the cusp of Geula, about to enter Bezrat Hashem, Eretz Yisrael, together with Mashiach, we too need to prepare ourselves by being very vigilant with these two mitzvahs as well, with both Kashrus and with Taras HaMishpacha. All right, so lastly, thanks for holding tight. Quick reminders, if you appreciate the weekly classes, share them. Friends, family, anyone else you think would appreciate them. All playbacks are available on mikvah.org/power hour and also on all podcast platforms. Just search us up, Project Chana Power Hour. And if you have any questions on the classes or you'd like to dedicate a week of learning in honor of someone or the lineage of someone, you could reach out to us via email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. And lastly, we will see you again, Bezrat Hashem, next week. And may our learning prepare us in our homes, bring every Jew home to Eretz Yisrael.